Keanu Reeves was just another face in the crowd, or so it seemed to most people walking by. It was an ordinary day in Los Angeles, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues across the busy city streets. Keanu, dressed casually in a denim jacket and jeans, entered a bustling fast food joint on the corner of a busy avenue. It wasn't a high-end restaurant, just a simple place where people came to grab a quick meal on their lunch breaks or after a long day. Inside, the smell of fried chicken, burgers and fries wafted through the air. The sounds of chatter, clinking trays and the occasional beep of the register filled the atmosphere. Keanu wasn't looking for anything special, just a quick bite to eat. He stood in line behind a man sitting on a wheelchair, his back to the counter, quietly staring at the menu on the wall. The man in the wheelchair was Michael Sanders. His eyes, though focused on the menu, seemed distant, like he wasn't really seeing the options in front of him. He was paralyzed from the waist down, and getting to this fast food joint was no easy task. He had to rely on his friends or use public transportation, which made even simple errands feel like monumental challenges. It had been over a year since the accident that left him in this condition, and he was still struggling to accept the loss of his independence. Keanu could have easily ignored him, just like everyone else in the crowded place, but he didn't. As Michael shuffled a few bills from his pocket, trying to find enough change for his meal, Keanu took a step forward. "Let me get that for you," Keanu said, his voice low but clear. Michael turned around, surprised to see the famous actor standing in front of him. His first instinct was to brush it off as a joke or a misunderstanding, but Keanu's sincere expression told him it wasn't. "I'm serious," Keanu continued, flashing a small smile. "It's on me." Before Michael could react, Keanu had already paid for his meal and quietly walked away, not waiting for any words of gratitude. The gesture was so simple, yet it struck Michael deeply. He stared at the receipt in his hand, unsure of what to do next. Why would a stranger, especially someone like Keanu Reeves, do something like that for him? It was the kind of kindness that made him question his view of the world. He couldn't understand it. Why would Keanu do this for someone like him? What did it mean? Was it just a random act, or was there something more behind it? But before he could dwell on it too much, he heard the familiar voice of his best friend, Jason, calling from the counter. Michael slowly wheeled his way over, his mind still racing from the encounter. But what would happen next? Could this simple act of kindness really change Michael's life? Don't miss what happens next. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the shocking twist that follows. You'll want to hear the rest of Michael's story. Michael Sanders had never been a stranger to hardship, but his life had changed in an instant. Just over a year ago, he was a promising young athlete, someone who lived for the thrill of competition. His passion for sports had fueled him for most of his life. Basketball, soccer, you name it. He'd been a standout player in high school and dreamed of playing professionally. But then, in a tragic accident during a routine training session, everything changed. A sudden freak accident during a jump had caused him to land wrong. He remembered the pain vividly, the sharp, unrelenting pain shooting up his spine as his body crumpled. It felt as if the world had paused for just a second before it all came crashing down. Michael had been rushed to the hospital, and after a series of tests, the diagnosis was clear. He would never walk again. A broken spine, paralyzed from the waist down, that moment marked the beginning of a completely different chapter in his life. His identity as an athlete, as someone who was always on the move, was shattered. Michael found himself in a world where even the simplest tasks, like getting a cup of coffee or picking something off the floor, were now daunting challenges. But it wasn't just the physical changes that stung, it was the emotional toll. He had always been independent, proud of his athletic abilities, and now he felt like a burden to everyone around him. His friends, family, even his longtime girlfriend had all struggled to understand how to support him. The loneliness set in. Jason, his best friend, had tried to keep his spirits up. He visited as often as he could, taking him to events, getting him out of the house, but it was never quite the same. Michael felt like a shell of the person he used to be, and every day seemed to drag on in a blur of appointments, therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. That's when Keanu's unexpected gesture at the fast food joint happened. Michael had been sitting there trying to decide between a cheeseburger or chicken nuggets when he noticed the actor standing behind him. It didn't even register at first. After all, Los Angeles was full of celebrities, and it wasn't uncommon to see someone famous walking by. But Keanu? Here? In this place? At first, Michael thought it might have been a mistake. Maybe Keanu had thought he was someone else, or perhaps he was just being polite. The idea of someone like Keanu Reeves, someone he had seen on the big screen in movies like The Matrix and John Wick, helping him, a random disabled guy at a fast food restaurant, was so surreal that it felt like a dream. But as Keanu handed over the receipt, the truth set in. This wasn't a joke, this wasn't some publicity stunt. Keanu had truly paid for his meal. For a moment, Michael didn't know how to react. He simply stood there, stunned, unable to form the words that might thank him for this simple yet powerful act of kindness. Keanu had disappeared before Michael could say anything. He left the restaurant without waiting for a thank you. And Michael, still trying to process what had just happened, sat there in silence. What did this mean? Why would someone like Keanu do this for him? Michael didn't know how to feel about it. Was it a random act of kindness, or was there something more to it? Jason, who had been waiting for him at the counter, looked at Michael's confused expression and raised an eyebrow. "Who was that?" Jason asked, noticing the receipt in Michael's hand. Michael slowly showed it to him. "You won't believe it," Michael muttered, still in shock. "Keanu Reeves just paid for my meal." Jason blinked, in disbelief. "Wait, what, Keanu Reeves, like the actor?" "Yeah," Michael said, shaking his head. "I don't know why, but he did." Jason smiled, though it was a little bittersweet. "Man, that's crazy. I don't know about you, but I think it means something. People don't just do that for no reason." Michael didn't respond right away. He was still trying to understand it. Sure, it was a nice gesture, but what did it really mean for him? Why would someone like Keanu, with everything he had, take the time to do something so simple, yet so meaningful? As he left the restaurant, Michael's thoughts were consumed by the strange encounter. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of kindness. There was something deeper to it, something that Michael didn't fully understand yet. But what if Keanu's small gesture was the beginning of something bigger, something that could change his life forever? Stay tuned for what happens next. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, because the shocking twist that follows will leave you speechless. The days after the encounter with Keanu Reeves were a whirlwind for Michael. He couldn't stop thinking about that simple gesture, the way Keanu had quietly, almost effortlessly, paid for his meal. He tried to tell himself it was just a random act of kindness. After all, celebrities were known for doing charitable things, weren't they? It wasn't the first time someone famous had done something nice for a stranger, but for some reason, this felt different. This was Keanu Reeves, an actor he had admired for years. He wasn't just some stranger off the street, and that made it all the more difficult to dismiss. Michael tried to carry on with his life. He had Jason, his best friend, by his side, but even Jason didn't fully understand what he was going through. Sure, Jason was always there, trying to lift Michael's spirits, but no one really understood the depth of the internal conflict that Michael was dealing with. That afternoon, as Michael sat in his living room, scrolling through his phone, he saw an interview pop up on his feed. It was Keanu Reeves talking about his charity work and giving back to the community. Michael felt a strange pull to watch it. The interview was filled with praise for Keanu's dedication to supporting various causes. But there was one comment that caught Michael's attention. The interviewer asked, "You've done so much for so many people, but is there one act of kindness you've done that stands out to you?" Keanu paused for a moment before responding. "I think it's the little things, really," he said with a warm smile. "The things we often overlook, the small everyday gestures, they make all the difference." Michael paused the video, staring at the screen. "The little things," he murmured, echoing Keanu's words. He couldn't help but wonder, was this just another one of those little things Keanu mentioned? Was this something Keanu had done without thinking twice? Or was there something deeper at play here? What if Keanu had noticed something in him? What if, for some reason, Keanu saw more in him than just a man in a wheelchair? The idea made Michael uncomfortable. He wasn't sure if he was ready to believe that someone like Keanu, with all his success, would care that much about him. Michael had spent so long feeling invisible, even to those who were close to him. The thought of Keanu looking at him as someone worth helping, someone worth noticing, made him uneasy. "I don't deserve this," Michael muttered to himself. But as he sat there in his apartment, his phone buzzing with messages from friends and family, he couldn't shake the thought that something significant was happening. Keanu had opened a door, even if Michael wasn't sure whether he was ready to walk through it. Days later, Michael received a call that would change everything. It was from a representative of Keanu Reeves's charity. They had heard about his situation and wanted to offer him an opportunity to participate in a special rehabilitation program, something designed to help people who were facing similar challenges. Michael's first reaction was disbelief. His hands trembled as he held the phone to his ear, unsure if he was hearing it right. "You're offering me a spot in the program?" Michael asked, his voice wavering. "But I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. I mean, I've been through the therapy, the exercises, but nothing ever seems to work. I don't know if I'm ready for another disappointment." The woman on the other end of the line was patient, understanding. "We know it's not easy, but this program is different. It's designed not just to help you physically, but emotionally as well. You'll have access to the best specialists, and Keanu himself is very involved in making sure it's tailored to your needs. We believe you have potential, Michael." The words Keanu himself stuck with him. He had already been surprised by Keanu's simple act of kindness, but this was something else entirely. But doubts clouded his mind. Could he really go through with it? What if it didn't work? What if he failed again? The fear of failure had paralyzed him long before his body did. And now, here was another chance, one he hadn't asked for, but one that was being handed to him by a stranger who had seemed to believe in him when he didn't even believe in himself. Jason called later that evening, sensing that something was off with Michael. He could hear the hesitation in his voice. "Mike, what's going on?" "You've been quiet all day," Jason said, his tone light but concerned. Michael hesitated. "Jason, I don't know. This call today, I don't know what to think. Keanu's people want to help me. They want me to join this program, but part of me feels like I'm just going to disappoint them. What if I can't do it? What if it doesn't work?" Jason was quiet for a moment before responding. "Look, Mike, I know you've been through a lot, but you can't keep running from this. Sometimes the biggest step is accepting help when it's offered. You've been carrying all this weight by yourself for so long. Maybe this is your chance to see what happens when you don't have to do it alone." Michael's mind was swirling. Jason was right. He'd been living in his own head for so long, pushing people away, convinced that no one could understand. But Keanu was offering him something. And maybe it wasn't about just the therapy. Maybe it was about giving him a chance to believe again. The fear was still there, but so was a glimmer of hope. What happens next? Will Michael take the leap and join the program, or will his fears hold him back? Michael didn't sleep much that night. His mind raced with thoughts, fears, and possibilities. The offer from Keanu Reeves's charity seemed like something straight out of a movie, something unreal. It wasn't just about physical rehabilitation anymore. It felt like a lifeline, an opportunity to turn things around, to rebuild the pieces of his life he thought were lost forever. The next morning, Michael stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. The person he saw staring back seemed foreign to him, a man who once had a clear sense of who he was, what he wanted, and where he was going. But now he couldn't even recognize himself. Was this the man who had once dreamed of a professional sports career? Was this the man who had once felt invincible? His phone buzzed again, this time with a reminder for his upcoming meeting with the rehabilitation team. The offer had seemed too good to be true, but here it was, an opportunity to step back into the world and face whatever came next. But as he wheeled himself toward his car, something inside him hesitated. The comfort of staying in his familiar routine, the therapy sessions, the attempts at moving forward no matter how small, was tempting. It was familiar. It was predictable. And at least in that space, failure didn't feel like such a devastating possibility. But then Michael thought of Keanu, of that simple moment at the fast food restaurant when the actor had seen him as a person worth helping. There was no judgment in Keanu's eyes, no pity, just kindness. Michael wasn't sure what to make of that yet, but one thing was clear. Keanu's actions had given him a glimpse of something bigger than himself, something that felt more real than the isolation he had grown accustomed to. So, Michael did it. He made the call. He agreed to join the rehabilitation program. His heart beat fast as he listened to the confirmation on the other end of the line. The program was scheduled to start the following week. He couldn't back out now, not after everything. The journey wasn't going to be easy, Michael knew that. The fear of failure lingered like a shadow, following him everywhere he went. But something deep down told him that this was the right step, even if it didn't make sense. A few days later, Michael found himself at the state-of-the-art rehabilitation center, surrounded by sleek equipment, doctors, and therapists who were eager to help him succeed. It was overwhelming, to say the least. He had never been the kind of person who liked to rely on others, but here everyone seemed ready to work with him, to achieve his goals he hadn't even dared to dream about in months. The program wasn't just about physical healing. It was about regaining control over his life, over his body, and perhaps even over his future. When Michael first entered the therapy room, he felt a strange mix of emotions: nervousness, uncertainty, and a deep sense of gratitude. He was paired with a team of specialists who had been trained specifically to help people like him. It wasn't just about getting his body back in motion, it was about rediscovering the strength he had once had and finding new sources of it within himself. He spent hours every day in the center, working with the therapists, going through rigorous exercises. The first few days were brutal. His muscles screamed, his body ached, and there were moments when he wanted to give up. There were moments when he felt like he was just reliving his old failures, but something kept him going. Maybe it was the memory of Keanu's quiet generosity. Maybe it was the hope that, just maybe, he could find his way back to a life he'd thought was gone forever. Or maybe it was the simple realization that he wasn't alone anymore. He had a team. He had people who believed in him. But as the days wore on, Michael began to notice something that both inspired and troubled him. He wasn't the only one struggling. He wasn't the only one who had fallen into despair. In the therapy room, he saw others, people who had faced similar challenges, people who had been through their own versions of what he was going through. It wasn't easy for anyone, but it was easier when you knew you weren't the only one fighting. It was during one of these sessions that something unexpected happened. Michael had just finished a particularly grueling set of exercises. Sweat dripped down his face, and his arms felt like lead. He wheeled himself over to the side of the room, trying to catch his breath. That's when he saw Keanu Reeves again. Keanu was sitting in a quiet corner, talking to a few of the doctors. His presence was calm, reassuring. But Michael's heart skipped a beat. Why was he here, Michael wondered. Keanu's eyes caught his, and for a brief moment their gazes locked. There was no fanfare, no cameras, just two men, one in a wheelchair, the other standing, sharing a silent connection. Keanu gave him a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they were both on. Michael didn't know what to say. He was still processing everything, the pain, the progress, and the lingering doubts. But when Keanu approached him, it wasn't with words of encouragement. It wasn't some grand speech about success or perseverance. Instead, Keanu simply said, "You're doing great. Keep going." And just like that, something shifted within Michael. It was as if the world had opened up, if only a little bit. The fear that had gripped him for so long, the fear of never being good enough, of never being able to change, began to loosen its hold. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe this was the moment he needed to keep going. But would this journey be enough? Would Michael truly be able to overcome his fears, his doubts, and his limitations? As Michael continued his rehabilitation, the days began to blend together. His body was slowly responding to the exercises, and although progress was painfully slow, there was an undeniable sense of change. He was starting to feel different, more hopeful. His muscles were gaining strength, his spirit was being revived, and even his confidence was beginning to shine through the cracks of his doubt. But just as he started to feel like things were heading in the right direction, something happened that threatened to undo it all. It began on a day like any other. Michael had been working hard with his therapists on the latest set of exercises. It was a particularly challenging session, as they were focusing on strengthening his core muscles in hopes of improving his balance. His arms trembled as he tried to hold himself upright, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he pushed his limits. His body was tired, but his mind refused to let him give up. At that moment, his therapist, Rachel, paused the session. She took a step back and gave him a long, thoughtful look. "Michael," she began, her voice soft but serious, "I think we need to talk about something." His heart skipped a beat. The way she was looking at him with a mix of concern and hesitation made him uneasy. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "Am I doing something wrong?" "No," Rachel reassured him quickly, but her gaze didn't soften. "It's not that, it's just, we've been monitoring your progress closely, and there's something we've noticed that I think we should address." Michael's stomach twisted with anxiety. His mind raced with a million questions. What was it? What had gone wrong? Was he failing again? He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "You've been making great strides, Michael, but—" She trailed off, as if unsure how to continue. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "There's been some concerning news from your recent scans. It's not a setback, but—" Michael leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to know. "What? What's going on?" Rachel hesitated again before she spoke. "The thing is, Michael, your spinal cord injury, it's more complicated than we initially thought. There are areas that aren't responding the way we expected. In fact, there's a chance that full recovery, or even regaining full mobility, might not be possible." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. His world seemed to tilt on its axis, as everything he had been working toward, everything he had been hoping for, suddenly seemed to shatter. His hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, knuckles turning white. He tried to keep his voice steady, but it cracked. Are you telling me that I'll never walk again?" Rachel's eyes softened, but she didn't sugarcoat the reality. "I'm not saying it's impossible, Michael, but I do want to be honest with you. There's a real chance that things won't improve the way we'd hoped." Michael blinked, the weight of her words sinking in. He looked away, his gaze unfocused, unable to process it all. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of frustration, fear, and anger. How could this happen? After everything he'd been through? After all the effort, the hope, and the small victories? How could it all come crashing down like this? "Why?" was all he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel placed a hand gently on his shoulder, but the comfort felt distant. "We don't have all the answers. Sometimes the body doesn't respond the way we want it to. But I want you to know that even if walking doesn't happen, there are still ways we can work to improve your quality of life, Michael. You're not defined by this injury. You're more than this." But Michael didn't hear her words. He was too lost in the flood of emotions that had taken over. He didn't want to hear that. He didn't want to be more than this injury. He wanted his life back. He wanted to walk again. He wanted to be the person he used to be. His eyes stung, his chest tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like everything he had fought for, everything he had worked toward, had been in vain. He was back at square one, stuck, hopeless, and overwhelmed with grief. As Michael wheeled himself out of the therapy room, his mind was in chaos. He didn't know what to think, what to feel, or where to go from here. He had come so far, yet he couldn't shake the sense of defeat that gnawed at him. The road to recovery had just gotten even more uncertain, and for a man who had already been through so much, this was a blow that felt impossible to recover from. When he arrived at the small cafe across the street, a familiar face was waiting for him, Keanu Reeves, sitting at a corner table just like the first time they met. This time there were no cameras, no flashing lights, just Keanu, who had somehow found his way to Michael again. Keanu stood as Michael approached, his usual calm and reassuring presence evident even in the midst of Michael's emotional storm. There was no judgment in Keanu's eyes, no pity, just a simple, quiet understanding. "How are you doing?" Keanu asked softly, as if he already knew the answer. Michael took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Not great, he admitted, the words escaping in a rush. I just found out the rehab might not work. They're saying I might never walk again. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful, but there was no sympathy, no words of empty reassurance. Instead, he sat down across from Michael and looked at him with the kind of calm strength that Michael hadn't felt in a long time. You know, Keanu said quietly, life has a funny way of throwing us curveballs. Sometimes we don't get what we expect. But that doesn't mean we stop moving forward. Sometimes moving forward isn't about taking big steps. Sometimes it's just about taking the next small step. Michael looked up at him, unsure of what to say. But something about Keanu's words, his quiet wisdom, made a small flicker of hope rise within him. Maybe the journey wasn't over. Maybe this wasn't the end after all. What will Michael do next? Will he accept the reality of his situation, or will Keanu's unexpected words spark something deeper within him? Stay tuned for the next chapter, and don't forget to subscribe to see how this story unfolds. The journey is far from over. The days following the conversation with Keanu were unlike any Michael had experienced. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but somewhere between the harsh words of the doctors and the quiet strength that Keanu had shared with him, something shifted inside. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a gradual change, like the slow peeling away of a thick fog that had clouded his mind for so long. He didn't feel miraculously healed. His body was still bound by limitations, and the uncertainty of his condition weighed heavily on him. But there was something different, something subtle, yet powerful. A small voice inside him was telling him that maybe this, whatever this was, didn't have to be the end of his story. He wasn't sure what his future looked like anymore. He wasn't sure if he would ever walk again, or if he would have to find a new way of living a life he could be proud of. But what he did know was this: he had control over how he moved forward. No one else could dictate that for him. Not the doctors, not the limitations, and certainly not the circumstances that had led him here. Michael's therapy sessions became a different experience. They weren't just about the possibility of walking again anymore. They became about building strength in a new way, physically, emotionally, and mentally. It wasn't about fighting against what was, but about accepting it and finding ways to live with it, to thrive in spite of it. Rachel, his therapist, was the first to notice the change in him. One afternoon, after a particularly intense session, she stopped him as he wheeled toward the door. "You're different," she said, her voice soft but filled with surprise. Michael looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "You're not just going through the motions anymore," Rachel continued. "I can see it in your face. There's a shift. I think you're starting to accept the reality of the situation, and you're not letting it defeat you." Her words felt strange but comforting. He didn't know exactly when he'd started shifting, but Rachel's recognition of it made him realize how far he'd come. There was still a long road ahead, but he wasn't walking it in the same way he had before. He was walking it with acceptance, with peace, and with the understanding that his journey was still unfolding. One afternoon, as Michael sat alone in the quiet corner of the cafe, reflecting on everything he had learned so far, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu Reeves. "How's it going, Michael? Keep fighting. You're stronger than you know." Michael stared at the text for a long moment. It wasn't the first time Keanu had reached out to him, but each message, each interaction carried weight. Keanu's words had become a reminder that he wasn't alone, that he was part of something bigger than just his injury. It was then that Michael realized something important. Keanu had given him more than just a charitable donation. He had given him a reason to hope again. As the weeks passed, Michael became more and more involved in the rehabilitation process. His progress was slow, but it was progress. Some days were harder than others, and there were moments when the old doubts and fears tried to creep in, but Michael had something now that he hadn't had before, a sense of purpose, a belief that the journey wasn't over. Even if the road was uncertain, he knew he could face it. He had changed. The old Michael, the one who had once been consumed by the idea of walking again, was still there, but he was now integrated with the new Michael, the one who was learning to live with the present, to accept things as they were, and to find strength in places he never imagined. He had learned to celebrate the small victories, being able to lift a hand higher than before, holding a conversation without feeling overwhelmed and, most of all, continuing to push forward. One day, as he sat outside the rehabilitation center, waiting for his ride home, he received another call. This time it was from one of the doctors who had been part of his recovery journey. "Michael," the doctor said, "we've been reviewing your progress, and we want to talk about an important decision. We think it might be time for you to start exploring new options, things like assistive technologies, independence training, and even more mobility aids. You've come a long way, and we believe you're ready to try new things." Michael felt a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, the possibility of using mobility aids like an exoskeleton or a new wheelchair to regain some independence excited him. But there was also a lingering sadness. It wasn't the future he had once imagined for himself, but it was a future that still held promise. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm ready." A few days later, Michael was back at the cafe where it all began. Keanu was there again, sitting in the same spot, as though no time had passed. They exchanged a few pleasantries, but then Keanu, ever the quiet observer, leaned forward and asked, "How are you really doing, Michael?" Michael paused. He thought about the long, hard journey, the pain, the doubts, the moments when he felt like giving up. But in that moment he realized something he hadn't fully understood until now. He was okay. "I'm doing okay," Michael replied. "I'm still figuring things out, but I'm learning to take it one step at a time." Keanu smiled, a small but genuine smile. "That's all anyone can do. Take it one step at a time." As Michael sat there, talking with Keanu about everything and nothing, he realized that his life wasn't defined by the injury. It wasn't even defined by his past or his limitations. His life was defined by how he faced his challenges, how he grew, and how he refused to let anything break his spirit. So Michael's journey didn't end in the way he had expected. It didn't end with the grand recovery he had once dreamed of. But it did end with something perhaps more powerful, a deep understanding that life is about how we adapt, how we grow, and how we continue to move forward no matter the obstacles. He rolled down the street, his wheelchair now no longer a symbol of defeat but of resilience. Michael understood. This wasn't the end of his story. This was the beginning of a new chapter. What's next for Michael? How will he continue to shape his life and his future? The journey is far from over. Subscribe now to follow Michael's ongoing journey, and be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is next for him? The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Michael. His rehabilitation continued to progress, though it was still a slow process. But this time, the days felt different. There was a new sense of hope in him, one that had been forged in the fires of his struggle and tempered by the support he'd found in unexpected places. His mindset had shifted, and with it, so had his approach to life. But while the journey of recovery was a deeply personal one, Michael knew that it wasn't just about him anymore. There was a greater purpose unfolding, a purpose he hadn't fully understood until now. It was the kind of realization that felt almost like an epiphany. Michael had spent so much time focusing on regaining what he had lost, on the life he thought he would never get back, that he hadn't fully grasped the power of the journey itself. The people he met along the way, the moments of struggle and triumph, the quiet conversations with strangers who had become friends, this was what life was really about. He had always been a private person, someone who kept his emotions guarded, but he started to see that there was something bigger at play. His story, his journey could help others. It could inspire them to push through their own challenges, to find meaning and purpose in the face of adversity. And in doing so, he would finally find a way to live not just for himself but for others as well. One day, as Michael sat in his therapy session, he turned to Rachel with a new conviction. "I want to do more," he said, his voice firm with purpose. "I want to help others who are going through what I've been through. I want to share my story, to show them that it's possible to find hope even in the darkest times." Rachel looked at him, her expression softening with pride. "Michael, I think that's an incredible idea. You've come so far, and you have such a powerful story to tell. Your strength could really inspire others. And so, Michael began to think about how he could do that, how he could make a difference. He started writing down his thoughts, his experiences, the ups and downs of his journey. At first it was just for himself, an outlet for his emotions. But as time went on, the idea of sharing his story grew into something much more. He reached out to local support groups for individuals with spinal injuries, offering to speak about his experiences and to offer words of encouragement. Soon he was speaking at conferences, sharing his journey with others who understood the struggles, the fears, and the hopes of someone recovering from a life-changing injury. Through it all, Keanu's words continued to echo in his mind. Take it one step at a time. And that's exactly what he did. Step by step, Michael built something new, a purpose that transcended his injury. He wasn't just living for himself anymore. He was living for others, using his experiences to bring hope to those who needed it most. Michael's story spread. People reached out to him through social media, sent messages of gratitude, and told him how his words had touched their hearts. He began to see that in many ways, this was the journey he was always meant to be on. His path wasn't about achieving the impossible, it was about embracing the present, finding peace in the midst of uncertainty, and helping others do the same. His journey became not just a story of physical recovery, but a story of emotional growth, resilience, and transformation. And through it all, he never forgot the unexpected moment when Keanu had paid for his meal, the simple act of kindness that had set this entire chain of events in motion. It had been more than just a meal. It had been a lifeline, a reminder that, no matter how dark things might seem, there is always someone out there who believes in you, who sees your potential, and who is willing to lend a hand. As Michael reflected on everything he had learned, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. He had come to realize that life wasn't about the destination, it was about the journey, the people you meet along the way, and the lessons you learn as you move forward. The last few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and triumphs. But through it all, Michael had emerged stronger, more hopeful, and with a newfound purpose. And as he sat at the cafe once again, watching the world go by, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. He had come to terms with his new reality, not by accepting defeat, but by finding strength in the face of adversity. And he knew that no matter what the future held, he was ready to face it, one step at a time. Now it's your turn. If you've ever faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, what helped you keep going? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue to inspire each other. Remember, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Subscribe to follow more stories of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. And share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they are stronger than they think. We're all in this together. Michael had settled into his new routine, speaking at events and sharing his story with people who needed it. Each time he spoke, he felt as though he was not just giving hope to others, but also healing himself. The more he reflected on his own journey, the more he realized how far he had come, how much he had grown, and how different his life looked, now compared to that fateful day at the cafe when Keanu had paid for his meal. But Michael never anticipated what would come next. It started with a phone call. One evening, as Michael was preparing for another speaking engagement, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it seemed important. With a slight hesitation, he picked it up. "Hello," he said, trying to mask the nerves in his voice. "Hi, is this Michael?" The voice on the other end was calm, but there was an undeniable sense of urgency. "Yeah, this is Michael. Who's this?" "My name is Jessica. I'm calling from Keanu Reeves' team." Michael's heart skipped a beat. Keanu's name sent a wave of disbelief over him. After all, he hadn't heard from Keanu in a while. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the fact that someone from his team was calling had his attention. "I understand you've been sharing your story," Jessica continued. "Keanu was moved by your journey, and he wants to do something for you. Something bigger than what he did before. Are you open to a meeting?" Michael could barely believe what he was hearing. Was this really happening? The man who had inspired him so much wanted to help him again. "Of course," Michael replied, trying to keep his voice steady. What exactly does he want to do? We'll arrange for a meeting soon, Jessica said. But Keanu has a proposition for you, something he believes will change your life even further. The line went silent for a moment, and Michael's mind raced. He had no idea what Keanu could possibly want to do for him now, but whatever it was, he had no doubt it would be something impactful. I look forward to it, Michael said, though his voice still felt thick with disbelief. The following days felt like a blur. Michael prepared for the meeting with Keanu, not knowing exactly what to expect, but hoping it would be as life-changing as the last encounter. The idea that someone like Keanu Reeves, a global superstar, was paying attention to his story filled him with both excitement and a sense of responsibility. The meeting was arranged for the upcoming weekend at a private, quiet location. When Michael arrived at the venue, his heart raced. He wasn't sure what to wear or how to act around someone who had done so much for him. But as soon as he entered the room, any anxieties seemed to melt away. Keanu stood there as calm and composed as always, smiling warmly when he saw Michael. "Hey, Michael," Keanu greeted him, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again." Michael shook his hand firmly, a bit taken aback by how genuine Keanu's presence felt. It was easy to forget that Keanu was one of the most famous people on the planet. His humility made him feel like any other person, just someone who genuinely cared. "I didn't expect something like this," Michael said, smiling as he took a seat. Keanu sat across from him and smiled in return. "Well, I've been following your journey. Your story is powerful and I believe it's making a difference, so I've been thinking about something." Michael listened intently, unsure of what was coming next. "I want to help you build something, a foundation, something that will support others who are going through similar struggles, people who feel lost or overwhelmed by the challenges they face after an injury. You've been through a lot, Michael, but you've come out on the other side stronger. I believe you can help others do the same." Michael was speechless. A foundation? He never imagined that Keanu would offer such an incredible opportunity. This wasn't just about financial support. It was about Keanu partnering with him to create something that could change lives. "Are you serious?" Michael finally asked, his voice filled with awe. "You really want to do that?" Keanu nodded. "I've seen how your message resonates with people. You have the ability to inspire. But it's not just about telling your story, it's about giving others the tools, the resources, and the hope they need to get through their own challenges. Together, we can make that happen." For the next several hours, Michael and Keanu discussed the vision for the foundation. Keanu explained how he wanted to provide not only financial support, but also access to therapy, rehabilitation, and even a community where people could come together and share their experiences. "This foundation will be a place where people can feel like they're not alone," Keanu said. "And you, Michael, you'll be the heart of it. You'll be the one to lead it, to speak for those who are voiceless, and to show them that there's always hope, no matter the odds." Michael's emotions swirled. He couldn't believe this was happening. This was beyond anything he had imagined. A part of him wondered if this was just a dream. But the excitement in Keanu's eyes, the sincerity in his voice, made it clear that this wasn't just a passing thought. This was something real, something that could change countless lives. As Michael left the meeting, he felt like his entire life had shifted once again. What had started as a small act of kindness, Keanu paying for his meal, had now turned into an opportunity that could affect so many people. Michael didn't just have a second chance at life. He now had the chance to help others find theirs. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time he wasn't afraid. The journey was still far from over, but now he knew he had the strength and support to face whatever came next. Now, what about you? Have you ever had a life-changing encounter, one that made you realize there was more to your story than you first thought? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates on Michael's journey and the incredible work he and Keanu are about to do together. This is just the beginning. The idea of the foundation had been set into motion, and with Keanu's unwavering support, Michael began to see his purpose in a completely new light. What had once been a life full of uncertainties and questions was now turning into something tangible, something that could help others who were facing the same struggles he had. Michael's life was no longer defined by the accident. It was being reshaped by what he could do for others, by the legacy he could build. Keanu and his team had quickly organized a press conference announcing the launch of the foundation, which they had named the Hope Project. The foundation's mission was simple: to provide financial assistance, physical rehabilitation, emotional support and community for people recovering from spinal injuries. But Keanu made it clear that the project wasn't just about the money. It was about building a network of people who could share experiences, uplift each other, and provide resources that weren't always available to those in need. The Hope Project isn't just a foundation, Keanu had said during the press conference. It's a movement to show people that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. And Michael will be at the heart of it, because his story has inspired so many already. Now, he'll help others do the same. Michael sat beside Keanu during the announcement, overwhelmed by the response. The press room was filled with photographers, reporters, and advocates, all eager to hear more about the project. As Keanu spoke, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not only for what they were doing together, but for the impact it would have on those who needed it most. After the conference, Michael found himself receiving messages from people all over the world. They were sharing their stories, expressing gratitude for the foundation, and offering words of encouragement. He hadn't realized how many people were silently struggling with similar challenges, people who had never spoken up, but now saw a light at the end of the tunnel. It was humbling, and it pushed him to keep going. The next few months were a whirlwind. Michael threw himself into building the foundation, meeting with medical professionals, and setting up support networks. He visited rehab centers, spoke with doctors, and collaborated with various organizations that could help provide resources to those in need. It was a huge undertaking, but with Keanu's financial backing and guidance, Michael felt supported every step of the way. Keanu, despite his fame and busy schedule, remained deeply involved. He worked with Michael on strategies for outreach, helped secure sponsorships, and even traveled with him to visit patients in hospitals who had been impacted by spinal injuries. The two formed an incredible partnership, one built not only on mutual respect, but on a shared vision to make the world a better place. But as the foundation grew, so did the pressures. Michael was now responsible for more than just his own recovery. He had the lives of countless others in his hands. The expectations were high, and the weight of that responsibility sometimes felt unbearable. Yet each time he doubted himself, he remembered the people who had been touched by his story, and he found the strength to push forward. The turning point came when Michael received an unexpected call. It was from Rachel, his longtime therapist and friend, who had been with him through his entire recovery process. "Michael, I think you need to see something," she said over the phone, her voice filled with urgency. "I just got word that a group of patients at a nearby rehabilitation center, some of them were inspired by your story, are putting together a surprise event for you." Michael was stunned. He had heard of people reaching out to him, but he never expected to receive a public display of support. "An event?" Michael asked, confused. "What kind of event?" "Let's just say it's something that'll remind you why you're doing all of this in the first place," Rachel said, chuckling softly. "You should come, trust me." Michael made his way to the rehab center the following week. When he walked through the doors, he was met with an overwhelming display of gratitude. There were banners, handmade cards, and even a wall of photos documenting the progress of various patients. Each photo represented a milestone, a step toward recovery, and many of them had written messages to Michael, expressing how his story had helped them regain hope. The event wasn't just a celebration, it was a reminder of how much impact Michael's journey had already had on the lives of others. The patients and their families had organized this event to thank him, to show him that the work he was doing with the foundation was changing lives. There, standing before the crowd, Michael was given a standing ovation. It wasn't just for what he had done, but for who he had become. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that fast food restaurant months ago. He was a leader, a beacon of hope for so many. As he looked out at the faces in the crowd, Michael realized that Keanu's act of kindness had sparked something far greater than a meal. It had ignited a movement that was giving people not only the chance to recover physically, but the chance to find meaning, hope, and purpose in the face of adversity. Back at home that evening, Michael sat in silence, reflecting on the journey that had led him to this point. The overwhelming gratitude from the patients, the success of the foundation, and the support from Keanu all filled him with a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. But what struck him most was how much the entire experience had transformed him. He no longer felt defined by the limitations of his injury. Instead, he was driven by the potential he now saw in himself and in others. He had found his new purpose, and with Keanu by his side, he knew there was no limit to what they could accomplish. And as he stared out the window, watching the sun set on another busy day, Michael couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the unexpected twists in his life. He had learned that sometimes the most incredible journeys come from the most unlikely places. So what about you? Have you ever experienced a moment in life that changed the entire course of your path? What did it teach you? Share your thoughts with us below and continue to be part of this journey. Together, we can keep inspiring each other. Don't forget to subscribe for more updates on the Hope Project and Michael's incredible journey ahead. We're only getting started, and there's so much more to come. The launch of the Hope Project had been nothing short of a success, and the transformation in Michael's life had been nothing short of miraculous. What had once been a single act of kindness, when Keanu Reeves paid for his meal at a fast food restaurant, had now grown into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. The foundation was gaining momentum, inspiring people all over the world to find strength, resilience, and hope in the face of adversity. And yet Michael knew the real work was just beginning. As Michael continued to lead the Hope Project, he found that the challenges he faced were not just external, but internal as well. The weight of responsibility, the expectation from the people who had come to rely on him, and the constant need to stay connected to his mission sometimes felt overwhelming. But no matter how tough it got, he never let go of the vision that had been sparked that day. Keanu paying for his meal and changing the trajectory of his life. One of the biggest moments in the Foundation's history came when Michael was invited to speak at an international conference on spinal injuries and rehabilitation. It was an event that brought together doctors, therapists, patients, and advocates from all over the world. Michael had been asked to give the keynote address, and as the day of the speech drew closer, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He had spoken at many local events before, but this was different. This was a global stage. Keanu called him the night before the event. "You ready for tomorrow?" Keanu asked, his voice warm but with a hint of amusement. "I think so. I've gone over the speech 1,000 times," Michael responded, though he could feel his heart beating faster just thinking about it. "But there's so much pressure. What if I mess it up?" Keanu laughed softly. "Michael, the only thing you need to do is speak from your heart. Your story has already inspired so many people, and it'll do the same tomorrow. Just remember, there's no wrong way to tell the truth." Michael took a deep breath. He knew Keanu was right. It wasn't about perfection. It was about sharing his truth, the way he had been doing since that life-changing day. The moment he had accepted that, the nerves seemed to dissipate. The day of the conference arrived, and Michael stood backstage looking out over the sea of people in the audience. His heart was pounding in his chest, but as he watched the other speakers go up and speak about the science of recovery and rehabilitation, Michael realized that his voice was just as important as theirs. While they talked about the physical aspects of recovery, he was about to speak on the emotional, mental, and social elements, the parts that people often overlooked, the parts that were just as critical to a person's healing. As Michael stepped onto the stage and looked out at the audience, a sense of calm washed over him. He could see people in wheelchairs, therapists who had dedicated their lives to helping others, and families who had experienced the pain of seeing their loved ones suffer. He realized they weren't just there to hear about medical advancements. They were there to hear about resilience, hope, and how they could find the strength to keep going. He began his speech. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael, and I'm here today to tell you that no matter where you are in life, no matter how dark things seem, there's always a path forward. My journey wasn't easy, it still isn't, but I've learned that even the most difficult moments can lead us to a purpose we never expected, a purpose that is bigger than our pain. As he spoke, Michael saw tears in the eyes of some of the audience members. He wasn't sure if they were crying because they were moved or because they saw themselves in his story. Either way, he knew he was saying exactly what needed to be said. He continued, "When I was injured, I felt lost. I was angry. I didn't understand why it had to happen to me. But then something unexpected happened. Someone reached out with kindness, a simple act, a meal paid for. And in that moment, I realized that even in the darkest times, kindness can shine a light. That one act started a ripple effect, and now I stand here, not as the person who was once broken, but as someone who's been given the chance to help others rebuild just as I did." The room was silent. For a moment it felt as if time had stopped, but then the applause began. First a few claps, then louder and louder, until the entire room was on its feet. Michael's eyes welled with tears. The standing ovation was more than just a thank you. It was a reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who needed a voice, everyone who needed to know they weren't alone. As the conference wrapped up, Michael felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He knew that the work he was doing with the Hope Project wasn't just about giving financial support or physical therapy. It was about changing lives in a deeper way. It was about giving people the emotional strength to face their challenges, the courage to push through their hardest days, and the hope that things could get better. Keanu had been with him every step of the way, not just as a partner in the foundation, but as a constant reminder of what true kindness could do. The meal he had paid for all those months ago had been just the beginning. Together, they had built something that would last, something that could impact lives for generations to come. As Michael returned home from the conference, he looked at the foundation's progress and couldn't help but feel grateful. The Hope Project was growing, and the ripple effect of kindness had spread farther than he had ever imagined. The truth was, he had found his purpose. And as he thought about the journey he had been on, from that fateful day in the cafe to leading a foundation that was changing lives, he realized something even more profound. Keanu's simple act of paying for his meal had not only transformed his own life, but it had created a ripple effect that was reaching across the world, one person at a time. And the journey, Michael knew, was only just beginning. Have you ever experienced a small act of kindness that changed your life? Or have you made a difference in someone's life in a way you didn't expect? We'd love to hear your story. Share with us below, and let's keep the ripple effect going. If you're inspired by Michael's journey and want to support the Hope Project, don't forget to subscribe for more updates. Together we're making the world a brighter place, one act of kindness at a time.